My name is Alan Cutter. I'm a retired Presbyterian minister living in St. Petersburg, Florida. I've created this series of videos in an attempt to help people find a way through the trauma of the pandemic and to sort out all the variety of emotions that one feels. You're free to use this video and these videos as you wish, with small groups, whatever. If you want the scripts that I am using, a small book with discussion questions will be available on Amazon after the 1st of July of 2020. As we emerge from this pandemic, our work to find a new healthy normal is just beginning. Perhaps a vaccine has been created, or at least an effective treatment protocol, hopefully both. Certainly, we all anticipate the joyful task of reuniting with families and friends and others in the various communities to which we belong and where we live. Those times of getting together will be full of laughter and joyous tears. However, not all of these reunions will be happy occasions. Many memorial services will be held for those who died during the pandemic and for whom services were not held. There is a lot of disenfranchised grief that needs to be addressed. Finding the new normal is going to be a hard task. We've all been affected by this pandemic. Just think of how our national perception of who is important and who is not has been challenged. Essential workers were not the richest or best paid or most highly trained among us. Highly trained, professional, wealthy individuals ranging from sports stars to business leaders to organizational executives were deemed non-essential and told to stay at home. As we search for a new normal, one of the questions to be debated is whether a non-essential person, like a baseball star or a football player, should be paid huge sums, while those we deem to be essential during this pandemic often have to work 2 jobs in order to survive. To this pandemic, with all of its unknowns, has been added a new and terrible dimension. Living as we are in the age of digital communications, we receive breaking news quickly. Now, we all know that xenophobia and racism have long accompanied any trauma. In the story of the Good Samaritan, we see people pass by a wounded individual. The shocking twist in the story is that the person who does stop is from a marginalized community. In the earliest days of this pandemic, it was called the China flu. Now, disease knows no national boundaries, and this misguided labeling gave permission to scared individuals to terrorize a segment of our nation's population. We have seen this xenophobia morph into racism of the worst kind. Riots have now broken out in our cities, triggered by memories of repeated incidents of racist brutality carried out under the old mantra of law and order. This digital revolution has, however, brought us something else new. Courageous people are now taking videos using their cell phones. The visual evidence provided shows that old excuse for brutality, resisting arrest, just will not hold water anymore. Part of our pandemic trauma is the reality of these incidents, and as we watch them on our various devices, we pay an emotional price that will have to be addressed. There are very difficult discussions coming about our social covenants and understandings. While these are taking place, the pain of individuals needs to be addressed as well. So I want to share with you some thoughts about how trauma and emotions and feelings can affect each of us. What I offer is based upon my own experience of helping lead healing retreats for veterans and their partners, as well as my own long search for healing from the trauma and losses of my period of war in Vietnam. That's a decades-long story of discovery, recovery, and new life. I do all this hoping to encourage those of us, we who are now pandemic veterans, to enter into serious discussions about how our physical, mental, and spiritual well-being has been affected by this experience. We need to have these discussions in a timely manner rather than putting them off for decades and letting the unaddressed, unnamed emotions fester, causing other problems down the trail. Let me set the background for what I'm doing. I believe we're all born with an inner critic. At birth, that critic has a lot of power over us in how we act, for we have not yet learned any real boundaries. It takes a while to begin to ask those critical kinds of questions that will guide development. Is this worth a full-blown tantrum, or will a simple whimper suffice? What are the results of this? Will it feel good or will it hurt? Really, our earliest boundaries are quite transactional, as all of the evaluation is aimed at satisfying our own perceived needs. Now, this is a healthy process, and eventually we will learn more complex boundaries that help us to set limits on our emotions as we pursue our daily lives. This is very frustrating, however, to that inner critic, who is no longer so completely in control of our activities, because we have learned how to make choices. It is then that our inner critic begins to find its annoying voice and changes tactics. Without the power to initiate immediate action, that inner critic turns to evaluating our daily actions and sharing its evaluation with us. Sometimes that inner question asks questions. Are you sure you want to do this? Perhaps maybe you should read the directions? Sometimes it offers advice. You can drive through this water. Don't worry, it's safe to dive here. While one has to pay attention to that inner voice, the value of its advice must always be assessed, for often the advice is based more on emotion than rational thinking. And after anything we do, no matter how well that action or performance has gone, that inner voice can be counted on to say, you should have done it better. Or, if only you could have. Or, if only you would have. Our inner critic rarely delivers a supportive message, preferring to undercut us with a woulda, shoulda, coulda, put down that brings up a variety of emotional responses. Emotions are what feed the power of the inner critic, and that inner critic is not a fair evaluator. Remember, emotions are neither right nor wrong. They just are. What matters is how you confront, accept, and handle these emotions. The touchstone I use is to ask whether or not the inner voice is leading me to act in a way that would be somehow destructive, rather than in a manner that could possibly be creative. However, all boundaries, all expectations, all negotiated relationships are thrown out when something traumatic happens. A hurricane or a tornado, a wildfire or an earthquake occurs, and the normal is destroyed. Emotions rise, and the inner critic has a good time. I've been down that pathway. In order for me to recover, to establish what my new normal would be, I needed some person or some group that could listen with respect. I needed the courage to tell my own story, and I needed a greater story with which I could connect my personal story. Here is what I'm going to offer to you. I'm going to take the 26 letters of the alphabet and assign to each letter a word describing or eliciting an emotion or feeling, starting with that letter. Then I will link to the letter a story or thought touching on that emotion from a greater story to which I might be able to link my own personal experience. Since I'm from the Judeo-Christian tradition, I will make references to the Bible. However, other traditions have similar stories within their histories, and those can be used just as well. My alphabet of emotions is by no means comprehensive. It only reflects the emotions with which I have struggled. Who's going to listen to all of this? Well, you can, if you want to, because for each letter, I have created a YouTube video. You can use the videos as discussion starters within your own family or community. Assemble a small group, begin, continue the discussions. Perhaps together you can create your own individual alphabets of emotion. Don't wait. Don't put it off. Jump in now and start. Having said that, the first video will begin with the letter A.